Hello, everyone. Welcome to the episode 104 of SoLeadSaturday. Our today's guest, Minter Dial, is a professional speaker, elevator, and a multiple award winning author specialized in leadership, branding, and transformation. An agent of change, he is a three-time entrepreneur who has exercised 12 different métiers and moved country 15 times. Minter's core career stint of 16 years was spent as a top executive at L'Oreal, where he was a member of the worldwide executive committee for the professional products division. He is author of the award-winning WWII story, The Last Ring Home documentary film and biographical book 2016, as well as two prize-winning business books, Futureproof 2017 and Artificial Empathy 2019. His latest book on leadership, You Lead, How Being Yourself Makes You a Better Leader, Kogan Page, came out in January 2021. He is been host of the Minter Dialogue Weekly podcast since 2010, and he is passionate about the Grateful Dead, Padel Tennis, languages, and generating meaningful conversations. If you would like to learn more about him, just visit at mdial or minterdial.com. Wow, this sounds like an amazing career journey. So let's just welcome him and hear more about his career journey. How did he find his areas of interest and managing to lead that? Hey, hi Minter. Very happy to have you on the show and really appreciate all your time and consideration being on the show.
It's my pleasure, Lisa. Thank you for inviting me on.
Thank you so much. It is totally my pleasure because we are talking a lot more about solid leadership, and your profile is a lot more aligned to transformational leadership and branding. So I think you are the perfect guest, and I'm looking forward to this episode. So to begin with, we have a general segment which is more about exploring how one can find their passion or the interest. So how did you find your areas of interest in leadership, branding, and transformation, and what motivates you where you are today?
So I think part of how I landed on leadership, branding, and transformation is, first of all about the people.
Mm-hmm.
And when you're leading people, what motivates them when you're the captain of a team of sports? How do you get people, up after a defeat? And then from a branding standpoint, the thing that really got me was trying to bring meaningfulness and sense into what you're doing at the job, so that you know why you're getting up and working hard, and then what your team, why they're going to be motivated. And then the transformation piece is basically, well, I take a quote from my mentor, a guy called Sam Villa. He said, "Hey, Minter, change is for sure. Growth is the option."
Mm-hmm. Yep. Very true. And thank you so much for sharing. Moving towards our next segment, which is more about questions from the audience. And the first question that we have is, what are the challenges of transformational leadership?
Right. Well, this is a big question. And the answer, first of all, is that the biggest challenge is the amount of choice that one has. And when you're trying to transform a team or a company, you have so many areas that might need work on. You have so many technologies that you can choose from. And today, the issue therefore becomes about your strategy. So here the point is, do you have a clear strategy? And Lisha, if you can believe it, in a lot of the work that I continue to do, and even in my past, working in reputable big companies, the fact is very few people really have a strong idea of what strategy is all about. Even if they do, the second challenge is then communicating that strategy in a way that everybody understands it. Because if you went to a big business school, but everybody else who works for you didn't go to business school, you need to make sure you're speaking the language that they understand. And I think a lot of leaders end up with shortcuts. They end up with big egos, and they don't spend the time to translate their strategy into the organization. Then ultimately, of course, what you want behind the strategy is to transform the organization in the pursuit of your strategy. And that's the key point, is that you can figure out how to organize and architect your strategy in such a way that the rest of the whole company follows in along the right path, and you make the right choices. So I think that's really the hardest thing. And ultimately, the reality is when you want to do transformation, you need to model the behavior. So if you want your team to be more empathic, for example, one of my favorite topics, or more humble with regard to customers, well, you as the leader need to know how to exhibit more humility and be empathic within your company. Because a lot of times we get sort of excited about how we're going to sell more to the customer. But you need to have a congruent internal culture that's going to help you exercise and realize, if you will, the feeling in the hands or eyes and hearts of your customers. So there's some of the biggest challenges of transformational leadership.
Wow. So like 2 points, actually, I would like to discuss more here. Like, when we think about strategies, right? Effective strategies at the leadership level, how does one can achieve that actually when they're learning or getting into that leadership roles? Is it just a matter of practice, or how one can have that, habit to build, like, come up with a good strategy for the
Right.
people?
So, yeah, well, here's maybe part of the issue. It depends where you are in the hierarchy. Because at some level, if you're a middle manager and you have a team and a business responsibility, you still need to fit in with the overall strategy of your CEO. And there, the challenge can be figuring out what on earth their strategy is. And then once let's say it's been defined, then your role is to see how your business can fit in with that strategy. The beauty of that idea is then that you are likely to get resources because you are fulfilling what the CEO has mandated as the strategy of the company. And then once you've got that sort of a grip on that, how that what you're doing strategically fits into the overall corporate strategy, then it's about choosing the right resources, people, products, and so on to satisfy that strategy. So really, I think if you can zone in on the overall strategy and figure out how you're going to correspond to that, then you're going to have luck or better chance, if you will, vying for the resources within your team. And yeah, I think probably experience helps, because it's very easy to go with the wind. And the issue is that you don't have a backbone. Just going with what everyone says. Yeah. Nice to do. But the reality is strategy means knowing how to say no
to
very certain things.
Yes. Thank you so much for sharing. And one more important aspect that you mentioned while answering this question is that, communicating or messaging that strategy to the people, which is a very important skill as well, along with developing a strategy. So we are coming to the second question, which is more about, when it comes to communicating or messaging your strategy, it comes down to the branding. So why personal branding is important for leadership?
So I just wanted, Alicia, to add one other piece, which is about storytelling. So sometimes one of the great skills of leaders when they're telling these, let's say the strategic imperatives, add in some personal stories, make it personal. So listen, Alicia and your team, this is what we're doing, and this is why it's important to me, Minter, your boss. I'm role playing in that respect. And bring in some story. The reason why this is important to me is because in my history, in my personal past, this has happened. Make it personal. So maybe a good sort of sequitur to the next question, which is, why is personal branding important? Well, at a very granular level, personal branding allows people to understand who they are. If it's done well, it's allowing individuals in a corporate environment to express who they are. And if you allow your team members to know themselves better, that's going to make them much more fulfilled outside of work in the rest of their lives. And so that's a pretty big present to give if you allow that to happen. Of course, a lot of times people get, well, I'm going to get worried that if I have a person who's a big Twitter fan or big on Twitter or YouTube, TikTok, whatever, then they're going to be bigger than me. Well, you need to take off your ego hat. Think about how allowing people to grow actually is your biggest gift. And so what if Leisha has a bigger following than I do? If she is in my team, I'm going to want her to grow that. And then the thing to be aware of is let go. Try not to control Leisha by saying you can't say this or you can only do that. You realize you're working for this company. The better thing is to allow people to be adults and to give them the freedoms, because they don't want to screw up. And afterwards, personal branding, we in whatever business we do, it's not about business to business, it's about people to people. There's the people that create these experiences. And so the more you think, the opposite of personal branding is institutional branding. And if everybody operates as institutions, well, you're going to get institutionalized. It's really, it's a set, it's too clean. It doesn't have any humanity to it, doesn't smell like real people. And so the whole challenge with personal branding is allowing people to be themselves and yet, of course, feel a part belonging to the corporation for which they're working.
Wow, it's like a very clear answers. Actually, I can see very clarity on the thought process that you are building, and that is a true sign of a leadership as well, when you are clear on your thought process and you can communicate that. And that is one of the important aspects when it comes to the leadership, and that I can see in you, actually, the way you are coming up with your answers. So thank you so much for sharing it.
And let me just say one more thing, Leisha, is that when you don't need to something I really practice, we could share the questions and I could write down the answers and I could write down what I'm supposed to say, but I don't do that, because what I want to do is have it come from my gut. I want it to be as instinctual and as a part of me, so that when you're listening, someone's listening to me, it's not like I'm reading off a script.
Yes.
I've integrated it. I'm embodying it. And I think that's a really key point.
Yeah. And sometimes natural conversations are good as well to connect with the people more. That's why I also don't collect the answers beforehand. Even though I give the shortlisted questions or the layout, I don't collect the answers, because I would like to be impromptu, whatever
totally
answers. And if I'm not able to, then I have to work on it, right? So because it is very, very important that you can be impromptu as well while communicating to the other person and respond to their answers. So that is also a skill, actually. So that is, I'm still learning, but so far it's going good. So thank you so much for sharing. And we have kind of a relaxation segment now, which is kind of a fun segment. And what I'm going to do here is I'm going to give you 3 keywords which are more or associated with your profile or the career, and you have to tell me whatever comes to your mind. So it can be an abstract content, abstract definition, or it can be a replacement keyword, or anything that creatively you think about. So it's more or about being impromptu as well. So whatever comes to your mind, you have to just share. So are you ready for that?
And this is without a shot of tequila.
Without shot of tequila, because we are virtual. Otherwise, would have to.
Gosh darn.
Okay, I would not start, because I want to influence the young people. So I would not influence them on the.
That's a good point.
I will not divert their attention from from the effective communication to something else. But so the first keyword that we have is podcast.
Difficult future.
Oh, wow. Why do you see it is as a difficult future?
Well, I think forecasting is a thing that a lot of businesses always want to do. They often architect 1 year, 3 year, 5 year plans. And in today's changing world, I think it's a little bit difficult to think of 3-5 years out. I think having a little bit more of agility a little bit more flexibility in the way you budget and forecast. Of course, you need to plan, because you need to, you're going to schedule something with a distributor, or you have a 3-year development of a car or whatever you're building. However, I think forecasting today is extremely difficult, and I think that the future looks more difficult. So if I were forecasting, I'd be planning for darker clouds than I would then for sunshine.
Wow. That's amazing. And second keyword that we have is writing.
Love it.
Wow. I saw actually a couple of your blogs. I went through that. And third keyword that we have is speaking.
It's a art form.
Yeah, very true.
And I think when I learned how to speak when I was at school, and I loved doing theater. And in the art of theater, you have to know how to express yourself to a wide audience. So enunciating the words that come out of your mouth, learning how to change the pitch, and therefore tell stories. And so speaking is something that you must practice in order to get good at. It isn't something that just comes naturally necessarily. You really have to learn it.
Yeah, but you did a lot of public appearances and the media appearances, so you are really very good at it. I'm still learning actually. I'm trying to get on the TED space, and twice I submitted, but they did not reach out. And then finally I got into the coach front, and I just got to know that it is kind of a business. People mentor you to get on the TED stage, TEDx talk. They charge like $6,000 to $7,000 to train you. And I was like, oh my God, why can't I train myself?
Well, you can, but
I can,
it takes a lot of studying. There's no shortcuts for
there's
learning
no
how to
shortcut.
speak.
But I'm trying to get, because that is my next target actually, to get on the TEDx stage. And at least first go with the virtual, and the second one will be like in person on the stage. So let's see.
Do it.
I will definitely reach out to you if I need any advice. So thank you so much. And we have a next segment, which is more about, a little bit knowing you more. So exploring your career work or volunteering. And you have such a huge experience. So you have not limited your areas of expertise, only towards the entrepreneurship side or something. Like you gave your hands in the podcasting, you write, and then you do the public speaking as well. So when I came across your blog, actually, how to make purpose come alive and avoid all the eye rolling, would you like to share more about it with the audience as well, so that they will know more? What you would like to tell from that particular, what kind of a message you would like to share?
So, Lisha, here's what I will say is that for the first 30 years of my life, I was probably more doing what I thought I should do. Or what society was informing me to do. And it took having a pretty spectacular experience, not necessarily positive, I can add, to change my way and to get focused on what life is all about. So I ended up crafting my own purpose, Minter's purpose. And that purpose, I'm going to tell you it, because that way it's very concrete. It is to elegantly elevate the debate and connect dots, people, and ideas. So when I say that, and I then tell you that I loved to do a film about love, courage, and honor, which is the film I did on the Second World War. When I do a podcast, and I've done 600 episodes, connecting people, and I write my blogs trying to connect dots and ideas with my books. There is a link, going back to that strategic component, there is a link pretty much with everything I do towards my own personal purpose. And somehow, hopefully, in what I'm saying, how I'm saying it, it feels like there's no eye rolling going on, because I live my purpose. And something that a lot of brands and entrepreneurs might do is say, well, I've got a purpose, but they don't actually walk the talk. And so it's really important, especially if you're in a company, to start thinking about what is your purpose, and am I achieving my purpose in the company or the startup that I'm in whatever I'm doing, and link that up. Sometimes it can exist, but you need to explicitly, intentionally think about that link, so that even when it's really difficult and you're tired and you're pissed off or you're grumpy, you know why you're doing what you're doing. And that'll power you through.
Yeah, that's great actually. And here I would like to just mention to the audience that, please do visit his amazing work. Minter is doing amazing work, and if you would like to learn more about him and get guidance, or you are looking for the mentorship, just visit his website, minterdial.com, and connect with him further as well on the social media platform at minterdial. So moving towards our next segment, which is more about, summarizing tips or advice. You already given a lot of things actually, but here we would like to get some kind of a particular books or courses as well to the audience, because a lot of audience there out there is like, young population. So any tips or advice would you like to give to the students or the professionals who are looking to get into kind of field you are in, because you are a multitasker, like, you are not only specific to one areas of expertise. Even though you talk about a lot more about leadership, you have expanded your skills in other space as well. So what kind of a piece of advice would you like to give to the students, and any books that you think value add, apart from, I know you have wrote a couple of books which I will already mentioned, but anything that's specific that comes to your mind and you would like to share in this particular segment?
All right. So it might sound obvious, but the first thing is do it, which means start practicing by doing it. Don't just think about, oh, maybe I'm going to make it perfectly and I'll get going once I've learned everything. You have to learn by doing. And so a starting point was podcasting. I began podcasting in 2010. And at the very beginning, I hardly knew what the word podcast meant. Today, it's more understood. And at the time, I was much of a pioneer. So I had to absolutely learn all the ropes by myself, which meant the audio files, the editing, the distribution mechanisms, and all these other things, and how do you measure what you're doing? So I absolutely think it's about doing by learning, or learning by doing rather. And I type, for example. In the old days, people like me, we didn't type. We had assistants, secretaries, and all that. So I type blindly. That's to say, I can type about 80 words a minute without mistakes, and that helps. But it's 10 fingers. I do it fully, and it's very intentional because I love to write. So learning to do that, and then as far as books, well, I mean, really, the first thing to say is read, read, and read, and don't. Sometimes you need to really read full books, not just the précis or the short version. I read approximately 2 to 3 books a week. I used to read a book a day, so I've slowed down. But I like to absorb books, and there are so many good books on leadership. One that comes to mind is by David Marquette, Marquet. He's written several books. He's a Navy submarine commander, and wrote several books on leadership. I even have a leadership reading list on Amazon, specific to leadership. It's just not about my books, but in books on leadership in general. But I read so many, and there are so many great books. The other thing I would do is not forget to read fiction, because storytelling is a tremendously important art. And if you're just reading about efficiency, productivity, effectiveness, you might get bored. Life is more than just about efficiency. And sometimes the art of storytelling, learning about empathy, by reading characters that are different from you. So if you're a guy, well, you should learn about how women think. And so read books where the heroine is well developed and interesting, and you gain empathy for her perspective and how she lives and experiences stuff. So reading fiction and so I would ask to read good fiction, because it's not, reading trash fiction is fun, I suppose, but it's not really that powerful for transforming who you are and what you're thinking about. And I have a few other books that are less about leadership per se, but I think are really important. And I'm going to mention three of them. The first is Being Mortal by Atul Gawande. So an Indian doctor in Boston. And it's interesting because it really is about learning that we die. And if you do know that we're going to die and how we die, then you'll be more present in thinking about today. The second one is by an English journalist, and his name is Johan Hari, and the book is Lost Connections.
Wow.
And the point here is we may be as connected as we think we are, but there's a lot of isolation and disconnectedness. And it's especially important today when we think about mental health. I highly recommend it. It's important to get connected with ourselves, with nature, with our friends and family, and what it's all about, I would say. And then the last one is I'm not sure I can get the title, but it's When Breath Becomes Air, and also by an Indian doctor. And it's really important to understand our place in the universe and what it's all about. And it's an extremely sad story about this man who had the ambition to become like the chief doctor in a specific place, and then realizes that it's not about the big title, that it's all about, it's your journey along the way.
Yep. This is really amazing episode. I don't feel like closing it because the way you are communicating, I just feel like I keep listening to it. So you are a great communicator and a speaker. I can truly see it. And you are truly a leader. So you already talked you have several books around the leadership. One to mention here is How Being Yourself Helps You to Be Better a Leader. So our last segment is around the leadership. So you are truly leading your areas of interest. So what is your leadership style specifically, and any specific leader that you always follow or admire, and why?
Well, I hope that I am somebody who is known for walking the talk. And so if I ask my team to do something, I'm prepared to do it myself. Hopefully I've actually done it already and have exhibited a competency for that. I'm also somebody who has, I think, over time developed a good amount of empathy. And although I'm certainly not perfect at it, I've really tried to make listening my strongest skill. Even though I'm a speaker, it turns out that listening and observing it makes for a much better writer and speaker. When you know how to see people, you know how to see what's going on and feel the experiences. And as far as people who have inspired me, or let's say I look after, I suppose to answer that question, I really should have been very close to them to really see how they work, because you can read all sorts of people in the press, and if you haven't really worked for them and sort of smelled them down to the core, it's hard to really assess them. If I had to give a name like that, I would say Sir Richard Branson, because I've met him I think 3 times, and each time when I spoke to him, he was fully attentive to me. He showed me that he was concentrated on what I was talking about, and he obviously is someone who's thrown his body, his life, and his person into his job, and I think it speaks to the type of brand that he's created. I'm going to throw a second person in, who's somebody who's the CEO of a advertising agency, number 5 company called TBWA, and his name is Nicolas Borda. He's French, and And what I love about him is that he's always very clean. He is who he is. You can feel it, you see it.
Wow.
There's an elegance to the way he is. And he also is very present online. And so at some level, I could call that greater transparency, because he's not afraid to express himself.
Wow.
Those are two people.
It's a very important aspect, actually, you are mentioning being a transparent, because that is something is very important when we think about trust. And that is one of the important aspect while we talk about leadership, right? So it's very, very important that, transparency is the major factor, I guess.
I would like to make sure that I have an opinion on that, which is to avoid being, let's say, radically transparent. This idea of dogma, the idea of going all the way to the end, it's actually not a good idea. So just like in life, when you have a spouse, having 100% transparency on each other isn't really what it's about. We all have our private space and even a darker space. And the key is that you know it within you. Then afterwards, once you have a full knowledge of yourself, it's about exposing the part of you that you wish to expose. And remember one thing, Lisha, and I'm sure you would agree, that there is beauty in mystery.
Yes, that's true. That is true. And I always say that, it is always important that having that personal space, irrespective of whichever relationship you are in, like, whether it is a friend zone, whether it is your parents, whether it is your sibling bond, whether it is your life partner, whichever relationship you have, it's very, very important not to affect each other's the personal space. Sometimes you need that, as you mentioned. Every person has their individualism, and they need that, actually. If you start jumping onto each other, then it's like, a lot of arguments and the fights.
And this is the key thing. That's the key thing I try to develop in my last book, You Lead, where it's really the biggest work is learning who you are.
Yes.
And including your imperfections, the shadows, the darker side. And coming to embrace that whole self. And once you do that, you're a fuller human being. You're not perfect, but you're fuller.
Yes, that's true. So thank you so much, Minter. This is really very great, insightful episode. I really enjoyed listening to you, and hope the audience will enjoy too. So thank you so much for all your time and consideration being on SoLead Saturday. Really appreciate it.
It's been my pleasure, Lisha.
Thank you. All right. So this is all about Minter and the way he's managing to lead his areas of expertise in leadership, branding, and transformation. Before we close our today's episode, as per our tradition, I'm going to close it with a closure quote from Margaret Mead. And the quote says, "Never doubt that a small group of thoughtful, concerned citizens can change the world. Indeed, it is the only thing that ever has." So on that quote, we are closing today's episode. See you guys in the next episode. Until we meet, happy leading, let's lead together. Stay safe. Bye for now.